Hello and welcome to the From My Prospective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, keep you up to date on all the names you need to know moving forward for the football landscape. It bleeds from draft eligible college football players to the first year and second year players in the NFL. So, with this being the first podcast, I figured that what better than to start with something that's going to be immediately thrown in my face this time in about 10 months or so. I decided that what I wanted to focus on was, since transfer portal is all the rage right now, especially with a lot of bigger teams stealing away their players. You've seen plenty of Alabama moving around, Texas A&M, quarterbacks like Spencer Rattler, Zach Calzada, Dylan Gabriel, the list goes on and on. But some of the guys you haven't heard of, we want to focus on those and how they can potentially make a big impact moving forward. So the first player I want to start with today is Braxton Burmeister. He's actually transferring from Virginia Tech. He started out in Oregon, transferred over to Virginia Tech, I believe, 2 years ago, and now will be a San Diego State Aztec. So all this means is he was initially viewed as talented enough to be the starting quarterback for the Oregon Ducks. He comes in with a lineage, in a sense, of being a very capable quarterback. He's a dual threat guy. You can see his wheels moving if you ever watch any tape on him. So last year, the mobile quarterback, he got over 2,400 yards all told, 17 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. It's not the most illustrious stat line, but that's coming up against pretty decent defenses in the ACC. Now he's moving to the Mountain West, where I'm not going to call their football bad by any stretch, but realistically, you are seeing more players being drafted by the ACC than the Mountain West. So the comparison there within itself, he's going to be playing less NFL ready players more likely than not. And San Diego State as a team went 12-2 last year in the Mountain West. Their leading quarterback, or their leading passer, was 1,400 yards by the end of the season. That's not anything I thought I would be able to say in 2022. That feels more like I'm talking from 1992. But hey, if it works for San Diego State, then it works. And now they're getting a quarterback that, again, was once seen as Oregon Duck capable of a player. So moving forward, it's easy to imagine them letting him go out there, adding another level to their offense, and really see maybe they could push for an undefeated year. They've lost a couple guys, most notably Cam Thomas on the defensive end, but it will be fun to watch Burmeister try to settle in and see if this third team can finally be the one where he turns out to be a star. So we are doing 5 players today, and that includes 2 quarterbacks, 2 pass catchers, and a running back. So we're going to go ahead and go to the second quarterback, which is Jack Plummer. He was recently playing his football at Purdue University, and now he will be a Cal Golden Bear. So the kid is massive. He's 6'5", 220 pounds, and over his entirety of his career, he's thrown 492 passes. Last year he had 127, but in his limited time, we saw him complete 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. If you're not going to get much time, why not make the absolute most of it and keep that ratio as nice as it looks? So Cal's quarterback last year, Chase Garber, he is now trying to fulfill his NFL dreams. I believe he is on the practice squad for the Las Vegas Raiders. So you've got that opening hole, and you've got a guy who, I'm not going to say plays like Jared Goff, but if you squint hard enough, especially whenever he's in Cal's uniform, you can kind of see a little bit of it. He's big statured. He's got a halfway decent arm on him. It'll be interesting to see him transfer over to the Pac-12, a little bit more offensive oriented. And so I think it could be a fun experiment. So Jack Plummer now moving on to Cal. We have a running back we're going to go ahead and move to now, which this running back was previously in a committee for a pretty loaded backfield. He decided to move out. He was originally in the SEC. He's now going down a little bit farther south than he was initially, not too much, but he is going to Texas Christian University, and we are, of course, talking about Traylon Smith. He was a key contributor for Arkansas last year. We saw him rack up 598 yards, 5 touchdowns, and the year before, he passed the 700 mark, got another 5 touchdowns as well. So The big thing to focus on here is what TCU has lost, which is Zach Evans. He was their RB1 in a sense, but there's still a lot of potential between both Traylon Smith and Kendry Miller, who was the running back two by all means in TCU last year. I think that they could make for a really, really good 1-2 punch, especially when you're looking at a guy like Traylon Smith, who is very clearly comfortable being in that role, but wants a little bit of a bigger slice of the pie. Kendry Miller was in a similar spot. Now they get to kind of come together. You can see a lot of usage there. I really don't know. I'm guessing Traylon Smith is going to be your pass catcher. He doesn't really have all that much. I believe his highest total is 100 and something odd yards as a receiver, but they didn't really use running backs as receivers a whole lot in TCU last year anyways. And so, maybe it won't be a problem. You just keep rotating them, make sure you have fresh legs. And with two capable running backs like that, it's hard to see a real issue, especially, one gets injured, God forbid, you now have that other option to fall back on. So that's one of our guys that's leaving the SEC that I wanted to talk about. But there's another receiver that will also be exiting the SEC, moving on to greener pastures. That is, of course, Auburn's Kobe Hudson. He's going to UCF now. And there's a lot of, dare I say, weirdness about his departure because he went on social media and kind of said that he had been removed from the team and didn't really want to leave Auburn, but now he's going back with a familiar face. He's going with Gus Malzahn, who is, of course, at the helm of the Golden Knights these days. So last year, Kobe Hudson caught 44 balls, had 580 yards, 4 touchdowns, and it was shocking to see him have to leave because he looked like he was going to be a stud for Auburn moving forward, whoever their quarterback ended up being. We know it won't be Bo Nix anymore, obviously, with that transfer. But now that's not his problem. He gets to go to UCF, who in turn added a new SEC arm. They added John Reese Plumlee from Ole Miss, but I'm not 100% sold that he'll be the starter. We've seen him in more of a utility role at Ole Miss whenever Matt Corral started becoming Matt Corral. So having multiple guys that can get him the ball, especially when Kobe Hudson is such a talented receiver, it's easy to imagine him becoming one of the premier offensive talents, skill position players, however you want to call it, in the AAC next year, especially if UCF can get their quarterback situation under control, which it's kind of strange because here recently they've had plenty of talent, Mackenzie Milton, Dylan Gabriel to name a few, but Blake Bortles if you really want to go back that far, but they can't consistently keep one. So maybe, I know they have a freshman, his name is escaping me right now, but I know they have a freshman that could be something moving forward. Maybe they have him and John Reese Plumlee split, but that is not my problem. That's Coach Malzahn's, and now they've got a pretty talented receiver out there to help them with that transition. So we have one more pass catcher that I want to make sure we talk about because at the end of the day, I think he's going to make a pretty big adjustment into a team that is losing over 2,000 yards from two guys that were drafted, and that is, of course, the newest Coastal Carolina Chanticleer, Sam Pinckney. He's originally from Georgia State, so he's staying inside the Sun Belt Conference. And Javon Hiley, one of those names that left, he is, I believe, 6'4", 6'3" maybe. And you can see a lot of similarities with Pinckney in his build. Pinckney is 6'4", and when you think about the fact that Coastal Carolina has done so much with players that maybe wouldn't have been what they are at bigger programs, I don't particularly think Grayson McCall would have gotten all that great of a shot, but now that he has gotten his shot, he has thrived. He's been one of the better quarterbacks in football, period. You look at Isaiah Likely, another guy that's leaving, Javon Hiley. None of these guys really stand out from an athletic perspective or give you a whole lot of inclination that they would have been huge success stories no matter where they've gone. But Jamie Chadwell has done a phenomenal job of creating a roster that can sustain itself and creating a bunch of guys who have really bought into this Coastal Carolina way. Now, when you look at Pinckney, he fits very similarly to what they wanted Javon Hiley to be and what Javon Hiley was. He was over 1,000-yard receiver last year, and they've got a lot of targets and a lot of yards to fill in. Luckily, he does still have one 600-yard receiver in Cameron Brown remaining on the roster, so maybe we see Pinckney and Cameron Brown form a nice little duo for Grayson McCall in what is realistically his last year in the teal. But it'll be fun to watch the process because we get to see a lot of Coastal building their guys up gradually. They don't have a whole lot of time left with Pinckney, so you've got to make sure he's there already. But from what we saw in his 2020 campaign, I think there's a lot of promise, and I don't think that they're going to have to be working too hard. I mean, they got to see him live and in color, him being in the Sun Belt, and clearly felt confident enough in his abilities to pick him up. So, hey, maybe Chadwell knows what he's doing. But yeah, that'll actually be the end of the first podcast. I believe this episode will be a little bit shorter than what I'm typically aiming for, but this is just to get the toes wet so you guys know what this is all about so I can get that first one on the road. Hopefully down the road we'll be trying to pick up some more interviews focused specifically with players. So yeah, stay tuned and hopefully you join me for the ride. So that'll be the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Jackson McCarty. Feel free to like the video, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Or if you're listening on Spotify, to subscribe, keep downloading them, keep playing them, all the good stuff. But we'll be back eventually. Thank you so much for watching.